And we are live. All right. Nice to meet you, Cam. Thanks for doing this. Excited to get to know you. And before we get into a deeper conversation, or even before you introduce yourself properly, this week, what is it like to be you?
Oof, this week has been quite hectic. So I traveled to Vegas for a seminar. It was a seminar with some, big people. I met the president of Ahern. Many people might know him from Ahern Rentals, and he sold off that division, and now he does a lot of construction equipment, and he actually owns one of the hotels in Las Vegas called the Ahern. And I met some other, high profile people. One of the guys, he actually took Pixar public. He's a really big activist investor, is what he calls himself. And so I met a lot of really cool, interesting people operating at a level that I can't even begin to imagine. And my goal was to pitch some of my offerings. And so I was pretty nervous about it. And I had an opportunity to do that. And then I flew back actually last night and really tired last night when I landed. Took forever to get my rental car, but now everything's good. I got to do my routine cold plunge and sauna. It's
Nice.
kind of like what, yeah, helps me reset and recharge and to detoxify. And I haven't had a chance to do that because I was traveling. And so now I'm feeling pretty good.
Okay. Amazing. I like to ask this question to just highlight a little bit of the humanity because a lot of the times we get into very inspiring stories or into businesses, six, seven figures or this and that, traveling the world. Like
Yeah,
I've been traveling the world basically full time with my business for 2.5 years. But I like to highlight the reality because social media and all of this is all just, hey, look at me this and creating all of these highlights.
right,
Whereas the reality is it's still life, and you're going through it and you have a up and down and you feel really tired here and then you mentioned you were nervous about your offerings and this, right? So we still experience these things, and I like to
right.
pre-frame the conversation that way to kind of have the honesty somewhere and the humanity
Yeah,
of it, right? I had a
yeah.
mhm.
I was going to say, I really like that you do that because social media just kind of gives people a snapshot of what life is like. And it's a snapshot that we get to choose, and it tends to be big and glamorous and however we want people to perceive us.
Yeah.
But behind that one small little snapshot, there's all sorts of stuff going on. There's a lot of doubt, there's anxiety, there's things not working out, there's missing, you know, flights and things like that that people
Oh
don't
yeah.
get to see. So it's yeah, it's nice that you start this way. I like that.
Missing flights in the US. I have a few stories
Oh yeah,
with complications. But yeah, I had one guy. I'll just highlight this and then we'll get into your introduction and what it is
sure,
that you
sure.
actually fully do. I had one person say, well, from the outside, like I have basically like this super luxury life. Like my clients sent private jets to pick me up and so I fly to their mansion and work with them. And I'm like, whoa, okay, that's wild. And then he said, well, and from the inside, like from my experience, it just kind of became life. I built myself up, and then he shared his really awesome story, and he's in his 60s, and he said, yeah, well, like it's just life. I wake up, I have a meeting, I go on a podcast, I do this, and then we'll hop on a chair, and I'm like, okay, and he took it like very in a friendly approach, where it's like normally you see, oh, people flying on private jets, oh, this, what you see on social media, it's so distant, and it seems
Right.
sound kind of cold, where he made it seem very warm, and was able to talk through it very nicely. I'm like, oh, okay, that was just life, and we have to remind ourselves, no matter where we are, whether you already made it and you're hyper successful flying on private jets or traveling the world or whatnot, you have to remind yourself to be grateful of these things and remind yourself where you started, because it's so easy to just get caught like, oh, this is life now, and you just have to see the problems again rather than just focusing on, oh, this is amazing, I'm traveling the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you said you're traveling for a few years. There was a point in my life where I traveled a lot. I went on essentially a 100 country journey for about 6 years.
nice.
And at a certain point, it just became what I did. I'd wake up, I would
Yep.
look at some days I didn't even know what city or country I was going to be in. I would just kind of look at what flights were available or what I could do, and I'd go do it. And I did some pretty amazing things like hike active volcanoes, hike the ice sheets in Greenland, slept in the oldest rainforest in the world, just doing some really, really amazing things that when I look back at, I'm like, wow, that was kind of amazing. But at that time, it just was life.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? People would meet me and they would say, wow, you're traveling for this long. And at that point, it started to just feel like it was normal. And it
Yeah.
is important, like you said, to kind of take a step back and be grateful for the life I did have, to show some gratitude because what I was doing, most people couldn't even dream, let alone imagine. So yeah, the gratitude part is really huge,
Yeah.
and I actually have incorporated that into my morning routine now. Every
Amazing.
morning I wake up, in addition to other things I do, I just kind of start listing up all the things I'm grateful for.
Amazing. Yeah. I think it's very important to talk about these things because I think, especially in the age of social media, of course, right? But there's this illusion that like, oh, like once you made it, you have this dream life, and it's like your problems go away, and you just like enjoy all this time. And then when you
Yeah,
talk to the people, it's like, yeah, like this is just kind of my life, I live, I relate to this, I work, I have meetings, I do a podcast, I do this, well, and then I move a country,
yeah,
and it's not this whoa dream life, oh my god, this is like everything is solved, kind of like
yeah,
I've made it and I'm done. It's not like that, and I haven't met anybody who said that it's been like that. So it's
yeah.
definitely like it's just life, and you keep living, you keep doing things. All right, so who are you? What's your story? What do you do in life?
All right, so my name is Kam Knight. I am an international speaker and author of a dozen books in the area of mental performance, such as reading, memory, concentration, and mind mapping, as well as
Okay.
personal mastery, such as self talk, visualization, and goal setting. And now I talk about a concept that no one's really talking about. And it came from the fact that for most of my life, I was a fairly driven individual and I had a lot of aspirations and a lot of wants and desires. And although I had my fair share of success, I always felt like I fell short or missed the mark, or the success was much more difficult and stressful than it needed to be. And I always wondered why that was. Why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it? And at the time, there were no clear answers. The best answers I heard was you need motivation and discipline. And although those things are part of the equation, I always felt like there was more to it. And that question always lingered in my mind. Every time I felt stuck, I wondered why. Why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result I want? And so, after reading books and doing coaching and attending seminars, I started to realize that, hey, wait a minute, there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. It seems weird, but there's a part of our mind that's built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And it's this brick wall that we hit anytime we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it. And so I call this thing internal resistance. And this is really my main focus now is talking about what resistance is, why it's there, how it holds us back, and all of that good stuff.
Okay. How does this relate to procrastination? From what I'm hearing, it's right up the alley.
It's pretty much right up the alley. It really helps to understand that as humans, we have a fight and flight response, right? We
Hmm.
all know that. And all animals, down to single cell organisms, have this response. And it either prepares us to stay with the task or make us run away. Now, as we humans have evolved, so has our flight response. nowadays living in towns and cities, there's really no place to run away to. We can't run away to someone's house or someone's land. And even if we do, we can't live off of that land. And so our flight response at its most basic and fundamental level is a form of procrastination. So when our brain doesn't want us to do something, instead of making us run away to another place, it makes us run away other ways. So at its most basic fundamental level, internal resistance or procrastination and sabotage, all of those things is our brain's clever way of making us run away from a task, activity, or goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You said you wrote about a dozen books.
Yes.
Is it all in this topic, or was it more?
No, it was more, as I mentioned, in the area of mental performance and personal mastery. So it's kind of in that topic.
Yeah.
But, as I traveled, as I learned, as I grew, as I, overcame my own challenges, I learned a lot about the mind. And like I said, at a certain point, I started to realize that there was a part of us that was designed to hold us back. And I really kind of like dove into that and came up with this concept of internal resistance. Unfortunately, it doesn't relate directly with my books. So it isn't like a really good upsell in terms of business. In business they talk about having a book, and the book is like kind of your gateway to get people into your ecosystem, and then you have the next thing and next thing.
Yeah.
But this course isn't really a direct like next step. It's kind of a different concept.
Mm-hmm.
So business wise, it wasn't the best move, but I really like the concept of internal resistance. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Will this be edited out or are we live?
We're live.
Oh, nice. Perfect. So I really like the concept of internal resistance, and I kind of moved away. Man, I don't know why I'm coughing. Let me grab a glass of water.
Yeah, I have some water. No worries. I like, this is again kind of to my point in the beginning. I like to do these live because it shows the humanity. Like, we're not all
Yeah.
perfect. Sometimes you gotta cough, sometimes you gotta sneeze, sometimes you have a little runny nose. It's so everybody knows that, right? But we see all of these people so polished with these with these like shows or whatever. Anyways, besides the point.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
so I'm glad you said that. So this is kind of cool. I normally don't cough, and I don't know why it came up, but anyways, yeah, so I really like the topic of resistance. So in many ways, I kind of left my book in the back burner.
Mhm.
I have them on Amazon, they're selling and all of that. But I really wanted to bring this concept
Mhm.
out into the world because a lot of people struggle with procrastination and sabotage or internal resistance. But the problem is when they can't do what they want to do, they feel like there's something wrong with them, that they're not enough, or that they're not good enough, or that they just don't have what it takes. But I want people to realize that that's not the case. It's actually there's a part of them that is built to hold them back, and it's actively working to hold them back. And unless they understand resistance, it'll continue to hold them back.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a course that you created, you said?
Yep, it's called Conquer Internal Resistance, and it kind of dives into not just what resistance is, but also talks about our wanting mechanism.
Mhm.
And what's really interesting is that our own wants and desires can be the very thing that gets in the way of us being able to go after and achieve our wants.
Mhm.
And the reason is because the part of the brain that creates wants, it's completely unrestrained. It's creating wants one after another. The only job of this part of the brain, which I call the wanting mechanism, is to create wants. And it's cranking out wants day after day at a pace faster than any one person can achieve. And you can think of this wanting mechanism like a simple on off switch, which gets triggered based on certain cues. It sees someone with nice shoes and it wants it. The latest iPhone comes out and it wants that too. Someone attractive walks by and it wants that as well. The wanting mechanism creates so many wants in a single day that no one person has the time, energy, and resources to achieve it in a lifetime. Even if we live multiple lives, we couldn't enjoy, let alone achieve all the wants that our brain is producing. That's because our wanting mechanism doesn't get that our time, energy, and resources are limited. It simply creates wants. Nor does it check to see if the want is achievable or fulfilling. It simply creates wants. Even while we're working on one want, the mechanism is creating other wants to chase.
Yeah.
And so wanting mechanism is the reason we buy stuff we don't need, crave things that aren't fulfilling, and the reason people cheat when they're already in a relationship.
Mm,
And it's also the reason why it's so hard to do the work because the mechanism pulls us in so many directions, it's difficult to focus on any one. So, the topic of resistance really is about understanding our wanting mechanism, understanding the part of the brain that holds us back, and then understanding how it holds us back. But because our brain is very tricky and sly, when it holds us back, it doesn't tell us it is. It doesn't say, hey, Andra, this thing that you're trying to do, well, it goes against our self image, so we're just going to sit here and do nothing. It manifests in all sorts of tricks. And so I help people understand what some of those tricks are so they're not manipulated by them. So it's a pretty, it really goes deep. And I have a
hmm.
saying, go deep or go home. And so this course really covers what's going on internally for us to help us understand why we can't do what we want to do and how to get ourselves to do what it is we want to
Amazing. All right. What was your research like, or what was your inspiration, or who were people? What was the kind of research you did? Obviously, with combination of probably testing on yourself and experimenting with yourself and trying different things. Um, what who are the teachers or what books or something like this that helped kind of shape this?
This idea,
So,
this
yeah.
actually was a culmination of really a question that lingered in my mind for the last 15 to 20 years of why is it if I want to do something, I can't? And like I said, the more books I read, coaching I did, the more seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the brain. And so I learned a lot of different things. And as I mentioned, I've traveled to 100 countries. And it wasn't just a trip of fun and seeing amazing sights.
Hmm.
It was really a journey of healing because I had a lot of mental emotional challenges.
Yeah.
So I was seeing shamans in the jungles of Colombia, working with healers in Brazil, witch
Nice.
doctors in Africa, temples in Asia. It was really a gambit of everything. And over time my mind just kind of like was processing all this information unconsciously, and essentially it came up with this concept.
Amazing.
Though, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Do you remember any maybe specific experiences or specific insights or breakthroughs that you've had kind of along the way that helped you, and then when you're looking back, like, oh, I want to put this into the course because this helped me the most?
I wouldn't say if there was any one major breakthrough, but there were tons of breakthroughs.
Hmm.
And I want to talk about one breakthrough that came up that kind of related to what we were talking about earlier about how, we might have like a dream and aspiration. And once we get it, it actually starts to feel like it's normal and not this big deal anymore.
Hmm.
And it's actually an aspect of our wanting mechanism. And all of us have it and we all go through it. And what I usually have people do to help them understand or understand this concept is for people to imagine having everything that it is they want, like whatever they're working hard towards, whatever their dreams are, whatever their aspirations are, whether it's to have a nice car, a big house, a prestigious job, that sexy someone. I want everyone listening to this, imagine having all that. Now, know that even if you had all that, you wouldn't be happy. That's because our wanting mechanism will just want more and more and more. And so, if somebody was wondering why that is, when we want something and we get it, it just becomes normal. It's actually just a human condition. It's just the way we are. It's when we get something, our brain just starts thinking about the next thing and the next thing after that. And the way I came to this conclusion or concept is that when I was traveling, I learned a lot about the history of places.
Hmm.
And if you travel enough and far enough, you start to see a pattern that shows up with this human over and over, time and again, no matter what part of the world I visited or who I was studying. And it's a story of kings, sultans, and emperors fighting wars, battles, and conflicts to win nations, empires, and kingdoms. And what I learned about these kings, and rulers is that no matter how much they had, they always wanted more. When we look at these big historic figures like Alexander the Great or Napoleon or any of them, is that they had some of the biggest empires known to man, but they wanted more, and in their effort to get more ultimately led them to their demise. And I see this pattern a lot with us humans in normal day life as well. It's
Mm.
that we're always chasing for something, but once we get it, the brain feels satisfied for a short period and then wants the next thing and the next thing. And so, going back to what you were saying, it's like, wow, on the outside, somebody looks at our lives like it's so cool what we're doing. But to us, in many ways, it seems normal. And it's because of this aspect of our human brain, which I call the wanting mechanism.
Mm. I really like that, the wanting mechanism. I don't think I've
The,
heard somebody specifically talk about it this way. But yeah, and that's why people who already get rich want to get richer and richer, right? And like you said, people who already have a lot, they want to get more when it comes to land or power or something like that. Mm. Okay.
yeah. And a lot of times when we look at people who have a lot, we look at them like, well, they should be happy. They have all this stuff. But they don't realize that if they had all those things, they still wouldn't be as happy as they think they would be. They would still
Yes.
want more. It's
Yeah.
just the way we are. It's just, the mechanism, like I said, it's completely unrestrained and it's just cranking out wants at a pace faster than anyone can achieve. And what's really challenging about the wanting mechanism is that it can pull us in all sorts of directions. And there's many challenges of wants, and one of the biggest is something that we're seeing a lot with people right now is an overactive want or an
Mm.
overactive wanting mechanism where their brain produces all sorts of desires all the time. They see something and they want it. They hear about something and they want that too. In
Also,
fact,
like
they don't have,
right now. Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt, but also like right now. I want this right now.
yeah. And that's what I call an immediate want, where a
Okay.
person wants things right now, right away, and things aren't moving fast enough. And so these challenges that the wanting mechanism create, like I said, can be the very thing that keeps us from going after them. So it really helps for people to understand this aspect of their mind and to contain and get a handle on the wanting mechanism. If they don't, it'll pull them in all sorts of directions and it'll be difficult to move in any one. And if you like, I can kind of share, my personal journey with the wanting mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So most of my life, I had an overactive wanting mechanism. It's the reason I've traveled to 100 countries, written 12 books, and done all sorts of activities like snowboarding, scuba diving, rock climbing, yoga, dance, and so much more. My brain was stimulated by all the different things to do. If I saw a nice car, I wanted it. Most anything I saw on television, I wanted as well.
Mm.
And these wants were overpowering me. They were overpowering. They would consume my awareness so much that I would forget about the other wants I was already working on, or I would lose interest in them. And these wants were actually created an intense experience. Like every time I had a want, it would tense up my body and put my head in a knot. Just reading something as simple as personal development could have my mind going in all sorts of directions. And I realized, luckily at a young age, that if I wanted to accomplish anything in life, I had to figure out a way to get a handle on it. I had to figure out a way to like contain it. And what I personally did was I cut out television, commercials, social media, YouTube, internet articles, and even personal development. I
Wow.
even went as far as cutting out people from my life and essentially created a bubble that contained as much of the triggers and stimuli as possible. Now, I know this sounds extreme, but I personally believe someone with an overactive wanting mechanism, this may not just be the best solution, but the only solution. And I say that because our wants can be very unruly. When they get triggered, it's difficult to release it and it's difficult to focus on other things because the want just like wants this thing immediately and all that. And as soon as we start working on it, it wants something else and then it wants something else. And it can really create havoc in people's lives.
Hmm. So the solution was to create more of a bubble, so change your environment in a way that your wanting mechanism doesn't produce as many wants.
Right. So I try to contain as much stimuli and triggers. So if I would watch television, my mind would see something that was really cool, maybe an
Yeah,
athlete doing really well and I wanted to be that athlete.
yeah.
Or a commercial would have a nice car and I wanted that car. And they would show, attractive women and I wanted the women. And so it was always getting stimulated by different things. If I go on social media, they have a nice pair of shoes and I wanted that. Or somebody would be a public speaker and I wanted to be a public speaker. And if I was reading an internet article and I read about something, I wanted that as well.
Mm,
And what I realized is that a lot of my wants was because there was some sort of stimuli triggering it. And if I could contain the stimuli, I wouldn't be triggered as much. And what's more is that it didn't just have to do with media and internet, it had to do with other people. So, as a lot of us, when we see somebody have something, it could make us jealous and want to have and do what they have. And so that was the same thing for me. If somebody had, wore a really nice shirt, I wanted that shirt. If they had really cool car, I wanted that car. And so I even cut out a lot of people from my life. And my goal was to contain as much of the stimuli as possible to keep my mind from being going in every direction.
mm,
And like I said, this sounds pretty extreme, but somebody with an overactive wanting mechanism, this may be the best solution if they find themselves, with shiny object syndrome, always chasing the next big thing, then they need to just cut everything out so their mind isn't being pulled towards these things so they can focus on what it is they want to do.
mm. How do you actually distinguish, or how do you choose, how do you control what you really want versus what's just being triggered from environment or from something that you saw? How do you make that distinction of like, okay, well, how did you choose to, okay, I'm gonna be on podcasts, I'm gonna write books and do this instead of everything else that your wanting mechanism is triggering you to have the impulse to want?
I do that by looking at what I find fulfilling. And this is actually an interesting concept. So there's a lot of concept t- of this word called alignment. People are saying that you need to be aligned with your goals and your aspirations. Though, what does alignment really mean? Does it have to do with wheels on a car? So, at its most basic fundamental level, alignment is what the mind wants and how the body responds. And this
Mm,
is really important. Just because the brain creates a want or desire doesn't mean that our body will respond to it as much as we think or all the time. In fact, our body can respond to something completely different. So it's important to understand that our brain can create wants for something and it not be fulfilling or as fulfilling as we think it will be. And the brain can do a great job of making it seem like it'll be very fulfilling and our life will be magical and great once we have this thing. And so what I learned over time is after achieving different things, things weren't as fulfilling as I thought they would be. And my body didn't respond as well to it, and I didn't enjoy it either. And what I realized is there were certain things that I really enjoyed. I did like uh, yoga, I like writing, I like traveling. And I picked, 4 or 5 things that were aligned with what the inside of me truly liked and found fulfilling. And I focused on those things and I cut out the rest. And it's really important that people get into the habit of cutting things out because the more you can cut things out, the more time you have for those few things and you can go really deep in it. I really like this quote from David Allen. He says, "You can have anything you want, but not everything." And I try to remember that because our wanting mechanism doesn't realize that. And so I have to focus on it to make sure it doesn't make me go in all directions. I
Yeah.
hope that made sense and it was like a clear
Yeah,
answer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that makes perfect sense. I really like that. I'm focused on fulfillment and alignment, what the mind
Right.
wants, and also how the body, what the body responds to. I think that's really
Yeah.
great. You mentioned
Yeah.
earlier that something like new wants kind of overpower and override the old ones that you're already working on, right?
Yeah.
So I would like to get maybe more specific on this, because I see so many people struggle with this, and that's what really creates procrastination or getting distracted, shiny object syndrome, all of this, right? So let's say that somebody decides that, like, okay, I really want to go to the gym, and they
Yeah.
have reasons as well, right? I want to be fit, I want to have energy, I want to do this. But when it comes to the time of getting to the gym, instead of, okay, I don't want to go to the gym anymore, I want to stay on the couch and watch TV, for example, right? So the
Yeah.
new want or the immediate want kind of overpowers the old one of going to the
Yeah.
gym. So what's your philosophy and how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So again, it comes down to picking a few wants, a few set of wants and goals that you have, and literally cutting everything out. And like I said, when I decided that it was time for me to contain my wanting mechanism, I really cut things out. In addition to television and social media, I tried to cut out as many people that weren't aligned with my wants. So people that like to watch movies, if the people like to watch television, they were out of my life because having them in my life would trigger me, would stimulate me to want to watch television, and I couldn't have that. I even went as far as to, stop going out to bars and clubs and doing anything that would put me in a situation that would pull me out of the want. And again, I know what I'm saying is kind of extreme, but when we're dealing with the wanting mechanism, especially an overactive wanting mechanism, we kind of have to take extreme measures. And like I said, I just kind of focus on a few things and try to cut as much of it out as possible. I didn't even want my brain to hear about or whatever. And if I did, I would have to really put a lot of effort to make sure that I brought the wanting mechanism back to my immediate goal.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I think it's a important point. I've heard also as well from other behavior kind of scientists or people who studied habits and stuff. The
Right.
environment really forms a lot of it. So if I wake up and I see a glass of orange juice, then I'm gonna want at the first
Yes.
like a very sweet orange glass of orange juice. Let's say I'm gonna want that very sweet glass of orange juice. But if I have a bottle of water or I have a glass of water ready over there, then I'm not gonna even think about the orange juice. I'm just gonna go for the water, which is the better option. So the way you set up your environment to be triggered to what you want in that moment or what you have accessible, I think that's really important. When you started cutting things out, have you noticed like any, how would I call this, like not withdrawal symptoms in a way, but remnants of the ones of like that your brain would still kind of even have these internal triggers in a way, because
Yeah.
you cut out all of the external triggers, but because you were so used to just being triggered all the time, did you notice still internal triggers coming up or like
Yeah.
internal ones?
Yeah. Yeah. And those internal triggers are still there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have as much control over me as they used to, where it'll come up and I don't have to fight or resist it. It's like, okay, it's there. But in the beginning, when I was cutting things out, like you said, you're more or less kind of summarize what I was trying to get at. If you can essentially control your environment and you can control the people that you allow into your life, the rest really becomes easy.
Mm,
But it doesn't mean that it's 100% easy, as we still have the remnants of the triggers. And with that, it was just a matter of impulse control. The triggers would come up, and I would have to kind of resist acting out on the trigger. And I talk about this concept of impulse control in my book on concentration, how much of what we're doing on a day to day basis is triggered by impulse. And so it's not something we're consciously deciding to act on. It's like an impulse comes up and we're acting without even being aware that we're doing it. And sometimes we don't even want to do it, but we find ourselves just acting it out. And over time, it was a matter of kind of getting a handle on my impulses, having more, not just awareness, but the control to resist it. And over time, the more you resist it, the weaker the impulse gets, where it doesn't really have much of an effect. Well, and over time, it does go away. But like I said, it doesn't always fully go away, but it'll go away to a point where it does come up time to time, but it's not overpowering and it's not difficult to resist. So it doesn't really, have as much of a hold on me. But it's not easy. It takes work, it takes awareness, and it takes developing that, I guess, willpower to control that impulse.
yeah. I think it gets much easier over time, as well as if you start rewriting or replacing old habits with new ones, even
Right.
specifically in the moment when you feel an urge or an impulse, right? Then that itself can be like a mini habit of, okay, how do I deal with this? And then impulsively we just go, let's say I feel an impulse to go on my phone or check social media, then immediately normally I would just go there. Whereas if you're training yourself to deal with the impulses better, I'm sure you've probably heard of urge surfing or impulse surfing. I'm not sure if they call it impulse surfing, but urge surfing, right? Where you just sit with it for a bit, and then it kind of starts to dissipate. The emotion of like that trigger of like, oh, I need to go check it now, right now,
Yeah.
kind of goes away, and it's much easier to just not do it. So that's been pretty helpful for me personally. Of just like, okay, instead of acting out on the impulse or doing forcing myself, let's say again with a specific situation, let's say I want to work, I want to write an article, I want to focus on writing my book, and my brain is wanting or I have an impulse or an urge to go watch a YouTube video or something. In the past I would be just like, no, like, oh, ignore that, force myself to focus on work, force myself to focus on work. That didn't really work that well, and I would just like keep getting super pulled towards my phone or YouTube or whatever.
Yeah.
And so what I started doing is like, okay, I don't have to work, I don't have to push myself to work, but I cannot go on the social media. So I can do basically whatever else. I can meditate, I can write it out, I can write that. Usually that's very helpful too, like writing out
Yeah.
the I'm feeling this urge right now to do this, right? I would have like a notepad or something, or I could go for a walk. Basically almost anything except that behavior that was like so impulsive, and that helped to kind of start rewiring, and then over time it gets easier to just not react to the impulse
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, you said a lot of really important things, and I do want to riff on a couple of things. But before I do, I do want to kind of talk a little bit more about the concept of the environment and cutting
Okay.
out people. This is a very, I wouldn't say like something I discovered. It's kind of talked about. Alex Hormozy talks a lot about it. He's a really big marketer, and a lot of people are really
Yeah.
motivated by his success. But when he shows his office, it's literally a computer and a desk. He says he's got all this, he shows how all his windows are closed. He's essentially created an environment where there is no external distraction or stimuli that can pull him away. The only option he has is to just sit in front of his computer and work. And like I
Mm,
said, for some, this might sound extreme, but for a lot of people, this may be the best solution. And James Clear talks about it in his book, Atomic Habits, about controlling your environment. So I don't want to make it seem like this is an out there concept that I just made up,
Yeah,
although it's something I did for myself and I learned other people are doing it. It is a strategy that even some of the most successful people are using.
yeah,
And as far as the impulse control, although I made it sound like a lot of my work in overcoming impulses was resisting the impulse, a lot of it was actually what you described. It was sitting in the feeling, the sitting in the pain of wanting something really bad, not being able to have it, and wanting to do anything to get it. And instead of acting out on the impulse, I just sat at the feelings. And the more you sit in the feelings, the more this pain dissipates. And the more the pain goes away, the more the want goes away. And the more the want goes away, the more that battle goes away, and it becomes easier to do the thing that we're trying to work on. So, this is a very extremely effective strategy to resist impulses or that drive towards distractions. Is not necessarily fight the distraction or fight the impulse, but just sit in it. You can close your eyes and just allow it to come up and sit in the pain of it. And in the beginning, it'll just get stronger and where your muscles might tense up and where you just want to grab that phone or go do that thing or take that bite. But the longer we can sit in that pain, the more that drive just starts to dissipate. And when that drive dissipates, it just becomes a lot easier to resist that impulse where over time it either stops coming up or you don't really think about it as much.
yeah. And I think both of these concepts are super, super important, and I think in order to give ourselves the best chances of success and doing the thing that we actually really want to do, rather than getting distracted or getting sidetracked, I think we gotta really implement both, right?
Yes.
Really create your environment and set up your environment in a way that prompts you or triggers you to kind of follow along what you really wanted to do. Again, the simple idea of an orange juice, of a glass with
Yes.
orange juice or water in the morning, right? And really prepare that for yourself in advance when it comes to a morning routine or going to the gym. Like, put the gym clothes somewhere where you can see them, where you pass by a couple times a day, and you're getting triggered, prompted. Oh, gym! Oh, gym! Oh,
Yeah.
gym! Right? And then the second piece I think is very, very important as well. The being in control of your internal triggers, right? Of the urges and the impulses.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Near Ayal and his work on this?
I can't say that I have, no.
Okay, maybe might be very. He I did his course. He wrote a book on this as well. I think it's called Indistractable.
Okay,
Um,
I've heard
in
that
in
book.
this
Yeah, it's
Indistractable.
actually a
Yeah.
pretty popular book.
Yeah. So I did the course with him, and I learned about all of this. I really like his model and his way of explaining it and understanding it. He has some visual representations of the triggers and all of this as well. So that was kind of a big foundation for me, where it was like pretty much the first time that somebody was talking more about, like you said, before before it was just, oh, just push through it, just resist it, just discipline. You have to be motivated, you have to be driven, you have to just you
Yeah.
don't want it bad enough, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas from that perspective, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I like how he described, and you kind of touched on this, and that's why I'm saying it. You said that you kind of sit in the pain, right? And you use the word pain. The way he describes internal triggers specifically is it is a feeling of discomfort. For
Yeah.
example, hunger, right? Like, hunger is a feeling of discomfort that makes you want to go eat, right?
Right.
So it triggers like that want, that feeling of discomfort, or that pain triggers that want.
Yeah.
But you don't have necessarily have to eat right then and there, right? but it's just that feeling of discomfort. And if you sit with it a little bit and you explore, oh, okay, I'm feeling like a little growl in my stomach, and this and that, and then you're like, oh, well, I don't feel so hungry anymore all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting concept to me. Whereas like I tried it, I'm like, whoa, this is kind of wild, right? And it was
Yeah.
really just
Yeah.
that feeling of pain or discomfort, but when you sit with it, it kind of dissipates and the want goes away as well. Um,
Yeah.
and
And a
I'm
lot of
noting,
times it's actually a long-term solution. So if you can sit in discomfort now and the pain goes away, then less pain comes up later.
mm,
And and if you do that more, the less pain comes up later. And so the goal really is not to have these triggers coming up for you to resist, but kind of release the trigger so they don't even
yeah,
come up. Yeah. And I
mm,
really think the people who are extremely successful and disciplined, it's not that they're trying something. It's just that they don't have as many
mm,
triggers and stimuli. And so they seem like they're more motivated or they're more
mm,
discipline when the reality is it's a lack of inner distractions that are coming out that they have to resist. And they can never understand a person like myself, or maybe even you or our listeners, who are constantly having these things being stimulated and triggers that we have to resist. It's like two different things going on. And so a person who has is constantly being stimulated and their wanting mechanism going everywhere, they really have to put so much more effort and so much more um, will and have a lot of awareness to be able to compete with someone who doesn't have any of that. And if that person can learn to sit in those discomfortable feelings and the pain and those strong wants, and over time they go away, then they have less distractions coming up and it becomes easier to do things.
yeah. I think that's a great point. I think if I think on this a little bit, the people who have, let's say, gone from being really distracted and really impulsive to going to where they're really focused and really disciplined, it's not so much that they've actually just controlled the discipline so much, but they have less triggers now. Like they get less.
Yes.
And so again, I think that would be the combination of the environment. You set up your environment in a helpful way, but also like you mentioned, if you practice surfing the pain or like sitting in the pain, less pain comes up the next time, and then less
Yeah.
pain comes up the next time, and then less and less and less. So eventually
Yeah.
you get to the point where it's much easier to just surf through it rather than
Right.
really experience it in a big way. But if you're in a momentum of being distracted all the time, that beginning is going to be really, really hard, and it just gets really very much easier on the longer you practice this, right? And
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
experienced it as well. And then of course I've relapsed a bunch of times, just being honest. And I've
Yeah.
tried and I've tried and I failed and I tried and I failed with so many different things, and I'm still not perfect at it.
Yeah.
But I
And I and
overall I
I'll
do better and better.
and I want to say I'm the same way. It's not like I've completely mastered this stuff. I do fall off, though I fall off a lot less than I used to before, and
Yes.
considerably less than prior. So I don't want people to think it's like we're at a perfect state. It's just we've just got a lot more practice with it.
Yeah. If somebody wants to get started with this and they're still in the stage of like having like say a very active overactive, like you called it, a wanting mechanism, and they don't really know how to deal with it, so they really struggle, or they like tried and they failed miserably, what are some of the first steps that they can make?
I think the first thing a person needs to do is get rid of their television.
Mm,
Yeah. And there's
okay.
two main reasons for that. One is that the television is really a box of just constant stimuli and trigger. Anytime you turn on the television, you're going to see people, attractive people that's going to make you want to be like them. You're going to see people with a really nice lifestyle and you're going to want that. You're going to see people, and then the commercials and advertisements are going to trigger the wanting mechanism even more. So you got to get rid of that. But the other reason why is that a television is such an easy default. So, like I said, when our brain wants to stop us from doing something, it doesn't tell us that it's going to stop us. It uses manipulative tricks. And one of the tricks is to just say, oh, well, after I watch this Netflix show, you know, I just need to unwind and and uh, turn on the television for a little bit, and then I'll be able to get back to what I'm doing. And that's a little sneaky trick because that one show turns into two shows, and two shows turn into a late night binge. And yeah, so it always becomes a default thing that we can fall back to. And if we can get rid of all these negative defaults and only give ourselves that one option, which is to do the thing that we want, then it's going to be a lot easier to do that thing. I'm not saying that it'll be easy, it'll just be a lot easier. And over time, it will get easy. So the first thing they can do is cut out the television. In fact, there was this one guy I was coaching, and I remember, we'd kind of set a plan for what he had to do during the week. I was coaching him to write his book, and he'd always fall into destructive behaviors.
Hmm.
And I drove like halfway across the city, took his TV, so he didn't have that distraction anymore. Because it was always a default for him. I literally like took it, put it in my car. It was in my closet for a few years,
For a
and then
few
I ended up
years,
donating
wow.
it. Yeah, because I never
Okay,
gave it back.
nice. That's
Yeah,
funny.
and so I ended up donating it when I moved out. But yeah, so television will be the number one thing. Uh,
Mm,
and in many ways, a lot of forms of social media, if
mm,
they are on social media, they need to cut out anybody on their feed that's going to stimulate the mechanism. So any sorts of stuff that are kind of like flashy, salesy, presenting material things, like I mentioned, to contain my wanting mechanism, I like literally cut everything out. So I cut out television, I cut out social media. I didn't have any social media accounts and things like that. And even though I was an author for a long time, I didn't have any social media because it was just too much of a distraction. And I know that it affected my ability to get my books out into the world by not having social media. But for me, it was really important to contain my wanting mechanism, and I didn't. Now I do have social media where I do post because I do want to
yeah,
get myself to a farther reach. But the only things on my social media feed are motivational stuff. So I follow guys like Jay Shetty, Alex Hormozy,
yeah,
um, Jim Quick, and so the only thing I'm getting is just like things that are telling me to put down my social media so I can go work.
yeah.
You know what I'm
I think
saying?
that's a great point. I think because with television, it's like you cannot really curate it, and so it's like it's just whatever it's on there. Even with maybe Netflix these days, people can like choose,
Yeah,
but it's all just entertainment, right? All just
yeah,
distraction. With social media, it's it can be very tough, but yeah, you can curate it, right? And there's literally buttons that say not interested and interested. So
yes,
definitely use those. That's one of the first things that I tell people as well. I'm a big fan of social media. I wouldn't be able to do basically anything without social media, without using social media. But
yeah,
I've had struggles with this as well, right? I still do sometimes, and I know many people, many others do. So I'm working on concepts and strategies on using
yeah,
social media for personal growth rather than letting social media use us, which is really what's happening for most people, right? Like
right.
the social media platform is literally using people for exploiting their attention to make money from them watching ads and creating
Yeah,
all of these triggers and creating addictive behaviors to the platform. So you open it impulsively, you don't even realize, and then this 3 hours are gone because you just
yeah,
spent 3 hours on social media that you didn't really want to.
yeah,
But there are ways that we can arm ourselves or prevent it or do better.
yeah. Yeah, there are ways to have it work for us instead of against us. And this is something I had learned from a couple guys who teach publishing. I'm trying to think of their name. They're the Mickelson twins.
Mm,
And they're actually good friends with Alex Ramosi. And they also talked about the concept of like their work environment is just their computer, nothing. They don't even have paintings on the wall, nothing. It's removing anything and everything and just whatever and only keeping what they need to do their work. And they talked about how there are browser extensions. You know how Google Chrome has browser extensions and
Yes.
Firefox that you can download. And whenever you're on a social media site like YouTube or Facebook, it blocks everything.
Yeah.
And so you only see what it is you want to see.
Yeah.
And so you don't see all these different videos that you can like be lured into clicking. It literally just blocks all of it, so you can just do what it is you need to do with it, which is maybe to search educational stuff or to connect with clients and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. Here's a tip that you wouldn't, most people wouldn't think to help contain the wanting mechanism, but it might be actually more important than cutting out social media and television and
Hmm.
environment, all of that. And that has to do with food.
Ooh.
A lot of our food, especially in the US, is highly processed. It has a lot of chemicals and additives and flavors and colors and stabilizers. And a lot of it is designed to stimulate us and it's designed to be addictive. So we keep consuming it. And because it puts us in a state of consumption, that consumption carries over to other things like television and social media. So if a person can start to change their diet and start eating more whole foods, more fruits, nuts, veggies, not packaged, not anything from plastic, um, it can have a profound effect on the internal triggers that we have, the internal stimulations we have. In fact, I will go as far as to say a lot of those triggers that we're using social media, television, and other distractions for is likely coming from an addiction to some food that we have. Or I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but it's likely because of the food we're eating, we're getting this need to do something, and we use these distractions to fill that need. But that need was really created because the body's craving something from food,
Mm.
unhealthy food that we're eating. And I'm gonna give a really quick story. So this is just us, talking, right? So there was this girl I was dating, and she was telling me how she was a lot more, let's just say, wanting intimacy, and like she couldn't control it.
Mm.
And I told her, it's likely her diet, and she didn't believe me and whatever. But the more we were hanging out, we started dating a little bit. And I don't, my diet is very strict. So if you're with me, we're eating a certain way. And she started
Hmm.
eating that way. And she told me how a lot of those needs just went away. Like she could just
Wow.
be like normal and calm. Um, and that wasn't the first experience. It's like multiple experiences. And so a lot of our like sexual desires and all these other things are being triggered by food.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I don't think I've ever made that connection that like food is impacting it this way. What I would
Yeah.
what I would see a connection with is if you are kind of slacking off with food, let's say, right? Or if you're letting your impulses control your food, then you're much more likely to let your impulses control your other behaviors as well.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's one part of it. But the other part is unhealthy foods. Like let's say Coca-Cola. We drink
mhm,
a Coca-Cola has a lot of caffeine. Caffeine's a
mhm,
stimulant, stimulating our wants.
mhm,
But there it goes beyond the caffeine. There's a lot of sugar and all of those things. And when we don't have those, it kind of brings us down. So it creates this need that we need to lift ourselves up. And that need sometimes gets transmuted to things like social media and television. We don't realize we're craving caffeine and sugar and some of the other addictive chemicals that they put in the food. We're just finding ourselves having this compulsion, this need that we need to fill and feed, and we end up doing it with other destructive ways. But what I'm trying to say, or the connection I'm trying to make, is that a lot of it was triggered because of the unhealthy things we were eating. And soft drinks is just one example, but a lot of these candies and Even energy bars, they seem like they're healthy, but they're just like loaded with unhealthy things, loaded with things that stimulate us, that raise our blood sugar, and all of those stuff. And when we don't have it,
Mm,
we crave it, and that craving is this internal conflict that we have, and it gets transmuted into all these other behaviors.
mm. Okay, that's very interesting. I think that's very important to say as well. So thanks for adding that
Yeah,
and sharing that in the story format. That's really interesting. All right.
yeah.
What what an amazing and very important conversation and discussion this was.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. Where can people get your course?
Yeah, so they can get it at endsabotage.com. Fairly easy, ENDSABSABOTAGE.com.
Okay.
And it's a course called Conquer Internal Resistance to Achieve Your Next Goal. It's a very in depth course. Like I said, I have a saying either go deep or go home. And so it goes beyond a lot of the surface level content that's out there that I found not to really be effective. And if someone's stuck and they don't know why, it's because they haven't like learned some of the deeper stuff that is controlling and driving our behaviors. So I think people would really like that. They can also go to kamknight.com and get my guide and 5 ways to end procrastination and sabotage. And they'll get a lot of good information in that as well. And that guide is free.
Amazing. All right. Perfect. So Cam Knight and End Procrastination and Sabotage.com. There you go. And
Yeah,
sabotage.
and sabotage.com or kamknight.com, which is KAMKNIGHT.com. And they can see all my books and courses. And yeah.
All right. Um, as a last thing, a last question. What's next for you in terms of life, business? What are your plans? What are your goals?
I've done a lot. When you travel to 100 countries and you travel the way that I did, I feel like I have crossed off my bucket list and some. And when I returned back to the States from my travels, I was just like, I've done everything. Like, what am I going
Right.
to choose? And so, I continued writing because I learned a lot of stuff that I thought would be really helpful for people. I did the course that kind of discusses a concept that not a lot of people are talking about. And in our discussion, we really only focus on the wanting mechanism. And the course goes into the reasons for resistance, the tricks of resistance, and all of that. So there's a lot more. Though now I will be honest, I'm kind of worried about how fast artificial intelligence is progressing.
Mm,
And so I'm kind of pivoting into that direction, learning more about AI and helping people use
amazing.
AI to stay relevant and things of that nature.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's a great space to get into. It's gonna
Yeah,
be if I had to guess, um, AI and social stuff is going
yeah,
to be really important. Social skills, communication skills, speaking skills, these kinds of things. Because the more persuasive AI will get, less people will be connected to other people, more connected to
yeah,
AI and technology. And I think those are two very, very important fields that I believe that they can be integrated in a very healthy way, and
yeah,
that's one of my kind of side things and side projects as well that I'm working on. But all right, that's amazing. Thanks for doing this.
yeah,
Thanks for sharing. And yeah, I hope we can stay in touch. And I'll definitely be going back to this episode. I'll save the link of this one specifically as well. Every time I have like a really good episode that's really valuable, I save it and I'll send it out like to people directly. Like, and I'm pretty sure you're aware of this. So many people ask me about procrastination. So many people
yeah,
struggle with procrastination and controlling impulses and all of this. So a very valuable, very important topic. I'll be definitely sending this out. And yeah,
yeah.
amazing.
Thank you very much, man.
Thanks
I'm
for doing
really
this.
happy that you found it not only enlightening but valuable. I put a lot of time and effort into developing a lot of this content, as a lot of people aren't talking about it. But I
Yeah,
think it's a thing that can really help people, especially understand why they're stuck, so they don't feel like it's because they're lazy or don't have what it takes. So yeah,
yeah,
thank you for that.
yeah. And I think you did a very great job explaining some of the basics over here. and I'll be checking out some of the deeper stuff as well. So great job, and